Hey guys, it's Spicy, and this is the Ultimate Breach Guide, and I'm going to talk about everything from his abilities to his playstyle. So let's get started. So in this Breach Guide, I'm going to talk about his abilities like Aftershock, Flashpoint, and Fault Line, and then I will talk about his ult, the Rolling Thunder. I will also give you an example of how you should be entering with Breach, but let's first start by talking about Breach's playstyle. If you pick this character, you have a very important role on the team. You're going to be the entry fragger. You're going to be the guy that your team relies on to create space so your team can move on to the point. So you're going to be the first guy in line that is going to approach the bomb site. So it's critical that you know all the areas of threat as you're approaching a bomb site. You need to know which corners to peek and which corners to clear. And just to be clear, entry fragger doesn't mean that you have to pop off and get kills as you enter, but it means that you need to make sure that you know where the enemies are going to be so you can clear those corners. And as you clear those corners and move up, your team moves up behind you. Thankfully, as Breach, you have some of the best utilities in the game that will allow you to do this fairly easily so you can clear up a path and move into the bomb site. Breach's Flashpoint ability is a projectile that can go through a wall and then detonate on the other side, blinding all the enemies on the other side of the wall. Now, one of the important things to note is that it doesn't really matter how thick the wall is. Even if the wall is really thick, the flash will still come out on the other side and blind the enemies. So there's endless ways to use it. And another thing to remember is that this is the strongest flash ability in the game, and it will flash your enemy for a longer duration of time compared to Phoenix's flash. So this flash really forces enemies to retreat behind cover if they're peeking a certain choke. This can give you and your team time to move into that choke and take position and then peek down those critical points that the enemy might be ADSing from and lock them down. Now remember, you're doing this ability just like all your abilities through walls. So when you play Breach, you have to have an innate feel for the game. You have to understand what the areas of threat are on every map, on every bomb site, so you understand which walls to shoot your abilities through. And this is something that's really important to understand. It's either that or you're relying completely on intel from your team, and that intel won't always be there. And also remember, with all his abilities, whether it's his Flashpoint or Aftershock or any other ability, you don't have to get a kill. If you can cause the enemy to retreat behind cover and give your team time and space to move on to the bomb site, you have done your job very well. And that is very important, because remember, if your team is on attack and they're not moving up, the more you stay in one position, the more you become susceptible to flankers and being sandwiched on both sides. That's why you always have to be moving up. And that's why as an entry, you play a critical role. And you have to use your abilities to cause enemies to retreat so you can create time and space for your team. So now the Fault Line is an ability that is bound to E, and this is an ability that you don't have to buy. It will recharge after a certain period of time while you're in the game. Now you press E to equip this ability, and to activate it, you press left click, and the longer you hold left click, the more area the Fault Line will cover. Keep in mind that when you're in the middle of executing an entry, the main objective of the Fault Line is to block space from the enemy. So when you approach a bomb site, you know there's going to be 3 or 4 areas of threat where an enemy is going to be peeking from to defend that choke. So what you want to do when you use your Fault Line is you want to make sure that you cover those 3 or 4 areas of threat so you prevent the enemy from peeking. And then right after you use your Fault Line, if you peek those areas of threats, you know there's going to be one of 2 cases. The first case is going to be the enemy is peeking that and he's going to be stunned because you Fault Lined that area. Or second, there's going to be no one there and that enemy has gone back into cover, giving you and your team time and space to move in and take up that position. And now you can start ADSing those areas of threats in case the enemy re-peeks. And a great thing to do is to follow the Fault Line with the Flashpoint ability. This way, you have the enemy stunned and they've retreated back into cover, and you can blind those critical key points and then rush them at the same time so you can get easy picks. And then we come to the Aftershock ability, which has a tremendous amount of utility in many different situations. So you shoot this ability through the walls just like all your other abilities, but the difference is that on the other side it does damage to the targets depending on how far they are from the explosion. So this ability is really good for getting people out of certain cubby holes or corners that are really OP in certain maps. And essentially what this ability does is it makes your job as an entry 10 times easier, because if you Aftershock a corner or the other side of a wall, you know they're going to be scrambling because they don't want to take damage from your Aftershock. And this gives you the perfect opportunity to go in and make your entry and start doing some damage while the enemy is scrambling. So again, as with every other ability Breach has, the goal isn't to kill people with their Aftershock. The goal is to get them to move out of certain positions that give them a clear advantage. And as they are moving out of position because they're afraid they're going to get hit by your Aftershock, in that situation, now you have an advantage because while the enemy is distracted, you have a clear ADS at the enemy. So now I've given you guys a rundown of all of Breach's basic abilities. The main thing you have to understand when you're using them is that for every ability that you use, you have to be covering ground. If you use an ability and you don't cover ground, especially as an entry, you're wasting time, you're wasting resources, and more importantly, your team is dilly-dallying in the middle and you become more susceptible to flanks, and the chances of you winning that round are very low. So what I'm going to do now is show you guys an example of how you should be entering with Breach. Alright guys, so I gave you a basic rundown of Breach's abilities. Now what I want to do is show you guys a real game situation of how I combo all of his abilities when I'm doing an entry. So this is going to be mid on split. Obviously it's going to differ depending on the points that you do. If you guys want to see a video where I do entry executes with Breach on every map, on every bomb site, let me know in the comment section down below. As I always say, you have to know the areas of threat when you're playing Breach, right? And this is a point I've been over before. You know the areas of threat are going to be here. So 1, 2, 3 with a doorway of 4 and 5, right? So that's 5 spots. So now when I'm entering, I'm starting the entry process right from the get-go. You know that there's going to be a wall here before the round starts. I already have my E ability out because usually the E ability is the first one that I use. The wall goes down, I come right over here. And what I do is I charge this thing up. And the main thing I'm focused on doing is I'm focused on taking away peak areas of the enemy. I cover the areas that the enemies are going to peek from. I want to make sure that when I turn this corner, that enemies aren't in these spots. I don't want anyone peeking from those spots. So this ability, it blocks that space. So that's why I use this first. I charge this up as quickly as I can because remember the round has started and I let this go. Now that whole area is taken up. And when I peek this, I know I'm safe because no one can be peeked at, because if they peek it, then they're stunned and I get a very easy kill. So you do this and then I take my flash out and I flash this right over here. Now, if I didn't do fault line and I just came here and flashed this, that would not be an effective flash because someone might be peeking and I might just die because someone shoots me, right? Because of their peek. So that's why you fault line first. You get people to leave that area. And now after fault lining, I peek and I flash this right over here. Now the reason why you flash this is great because if anyone's in this corner, they're going to be flashed. So as I turn this corner, I know I'm going to be at an advantage. If I flash this area right over here, I know that person here, here, and here is also going to be flashed. So that gives me a clear advantage as I peek. This is how the full execute looks. I charge this up, I go, I know no one's going to be peeking it, so I peek that far side, and I look at this corner, I look at this corner, and then I move here. And if I peek this, if no one is in this corner, what I do is I Aftershock this spot right over here. Because I know people love to camp right over here. So I Aftershock that. So now I know when I turn this corner, no one's going to be there. Right? So that's one less spot that I have to worry about. Now I can worry about that back corner and I can start looking at the rest of the area from heaven with height advantage. Now one of the things you might say is when I came here, I checked this corner, and I went here. You might be like, well, why didn't you check anyone here or here? That's not my responsibility at that point. I wanted to make sure, as an entry, I want to make sure the corners are clear so the teammates can move in. Now it's up to the people behind me to make sure that they clear those spots. That's the flanker's job. That's something that a Cypher or a Sage would do. So that's their job. My job is to get my team from spa to the bomb site. And if I do that, I cannot get a single kill. And I've done my job, right? And once I get here, now your team is in a good position where they can start taking the point. And ideally what you want to do is you want to have one more flash so you can maybe flash this spot right over here as you peek, and you can take anyone out of here as well. Usually how I do an entry with Breach, you want to get from the spa to the point as quickly as you can. Hopefully you don't get slowed down by Sage Orbs. If you get slowed down by Sage Orbs and stuff like that, make sure you don't waste your abilities at that point. Take the wall down, let the orbs run out, let everyone on the other enemy team use their cooldowns, and then you do this. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed that example. Now let's talk about Breach's ult, the Rolling Thunder. What this ult does is that it not only does it stun enemies like your fault line, but it also causes them to spring up and pop up. So that means that they lose complete control over their motion for a certain period of time. So as you can see, like, this ability is incredibly strong, just like any stun ability is in any game. This is something that you see in many games, that a stun ability is incredibly powerful. Like, for example, look at stun abilities in Overwatch, like Doomfist, who has his punch, or Brigitte, who has her shield slam. Like, those abilities are incredibly OP because opponents lose control over their character. So this ability works the same way. Because people lose control over their character, that makes this ability extremely useful in many different situations. Whether the team fight is a 5v5 or a 1v5, it doesn't really matter. It can help you get a win, and what it does is it clears an area, and yet again it helps you entry. It takes up a certain space and it helps you entry. And you can exponentiate the amount of value you get out of this ult by simply combining it with someone else's ability. Imagine combining it with a Cypher ability or Raze's rocket launcher. There's endless combinations, and the great thing about it is that the value is very easy to get because the targets won't be as mobile. If you don't have a teammate nearby that you could combo with, what I usually do is after I ult, I flash the enemies that are affected by my ult. Because one of the things you have to understand is that this stuns them and causes them to pop up, but it doesn't take away their vision, so they can still see you. That's why after I use this ult, what I like to do is always flash the enemies so I can take full advantage of this ult and easily get multiple picks. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this Breach guide. If you want more examples of specific entry executes on every map, let me know in the comment section down below. Remember to follow me on Twitch, join the Discord, hit that like button, and remember to sub. I will see you guys next time.